The inheritance trap. It started with a funeral. My grandmother's funeral, to be exact. I was 23, fresh out of college, and still naive enough to believe that family meant unconditional love. I stood in the back of the church, watching my relatives file past the casket, each one whispering their goodbyes to the woman who had raised me when my parents couldn't be bothered. Please subscribe to our channel and tell us in the comments where you're watching this video from. Grandma Rose had been my anchor. When my parents were too busy climbing the corporate ladder to notice I existed, she was there. When they shipped me off to boarding school at 12 because I was getting in the way of their social life, she visited me every weekend. When I graduated valedictorian and they missed the ceremony because of a golf tournament, she was in the front row, crying tears of pride. After the service, everyone gathered at her house for the will reading. I expected nothing. Grandma had 3 children, and I was just one of many grandchildren. But as the lawyer cleared his throat and began to read, I realized this day would change everything. To my beloved granddaughter Emma, he announced, who stayed by my side when others were too busy for an old woman, I leave my entire estate. The house, the land, the investments, all of it. Total value, approximately $2.8 million. The room went silent, then erupted. My father jumped up, his face purple with rage. That's impossible. She's senile. She doesn't know what she's doing. My mother grabbed the papers from the lawyer's hands. This is a mistake. Emma is just a child. She can't handle that kind of responsibility. My Uncle Steve started shouting about how unfair it was. I'm the eldest son. The estate should go to me. But the lawyer was prepared. Mrs. Wellington was of sound mind when she made this will 6 months ago. She specifically requested that I inform you all that she made this decision because Emma was the only one who truly cared for her in her final years. I sat there stunned. Not just by the money, but by the hatred in my family's eyes. They weren't looking at me like their daughter, niece, or granddaughter anymore. They were looking at me like an obstacle between them and what they thought they deserved. The next few weeks were a nightmare. Phone calls at all hours. Visits from relatives I hadn't seen in years, suddenly interested in my well-being. My parents moved back into their childhood home, claiming they needed to help me transition into my new responsibilities. That's when I discovered the truth about my family. I was going through Grandma's papers when I found a hidden folder in her desk. Inside were letters, bank statements, and legal documents that made my blood run cold. For the past 5 years, my father had been stealing from her. He'd been forging her signature, moving money from her accounts into his own, convinced she was too old to notice. But she had noticed. She'd been documenting everything. There was more. A letter addressed to me, written in her shaky handwriting. My dearest Emma, if you're reading this, then I'm gone and you've inherited everything. Your father doesn't know I discovered his theft. I've been pretending to be confused, letting him think he was getting away with it. But I kept records of everything. He's stolen over $400,000 from me. I'm leaving you everything not just because I love you, but because I need you to make this right. There's a safety deposit box at First National Bank. Box 247. The key is taped under my jewelry box. Inside you'll find all the evidence you need. Make him pay, sweetheart. Make them all pay for what they've done. My hands were shaking as I found the key and drove to the bank. Inside the safety deposit box was a treasure trove of evidence. Bank statements showing unauthorized withdrawals, copies of forged documents, even photographs of checks my father had written to himself using her account. But there was something else. A recording device and a note. I recorded our last conversation. Listen to it. I plugged in my headphones and pressed play. It was my father's voice, cold and calculating. Mom, you need to sign this power of attorney. You're getting old, confused. Let me handle your finances. I'm not confused, Richard, came my grandmother's weak voice. I know exactly what you've been doing. I don't know what you're talking about. The $50,000 you took last month. The $75,000 before that. Did you think I wouldn't notice? A pause. Then my father's voice, dangerous now. Listen, old woman. You're going to give me what I want, or I'll make sure you spend your last days in the worst nursing home I can find. Emma won't be able to visit you. No one will. You'll die alone. Over my dead body, Grandma whispered. "That can be arranged," my father replied. The recording ended. I sat in my car in the bank parking lot and cried. Not just for the money he'd stolen, but for the threats he'd made against the woman who loved me most. That night, I called a lawyer. Not the family lawyer who'd read the will, but a criminal attorney who specialized in elder abuse and fraud. I told him everything. "We have enough evidence to put him away for 10 years, he said after reviewing the documents. "But are you sure you want to do this? He's your father." "He stopped being my father the moment he threatened to hurt my grandmother," I replied. We filed the charges the next day. The FBI raided my parents' house at dawn, seizing computers, documents, and financial records. My father was arrested at his office, handcuffed in front of his colleagues. The local news picked up the story, "Prominent businessman arrested for elder abuse and fraud." The article detailed how he'd stolen from his own mother, threatened her when she discovered his crimes, and then acted shocked when she left him nothing in her will. But I wasn't done. I hired a private investigator to look into my other relatives. If my father was stealing from Grandma, maybe others were too. What I found was a web of lies and manipulation that went back years. My Uncle Steve had been overcharging her for home repairs that were never done. My Aunt Linda had been selling family heirlooms that Grandma had loaned her and keeping the money. My cousin Mark had convinced her to co-sign a loan for his failed business, leaving her liable for $80,000 in debt. They'd all been circling her like vultures, taking what they could while she was alive, then acting outraged when she left them nothing. I filed lawsuits against all of them. Civil suits to recover the money they'd stolen, criminal complaints where evidence supported it. I used my inheritance to hire the best lawyers money could buy, and I made sure every penny was accounted for. The trials were brutal. My family hired their own lawyers, tried to paint me as a gold digger who'd manipulated a senile old woman. They brought up my boarding school years, claiming I'd been troubled and that Grandma had felt sorry for me. But the evidence was overwhelming. The jury saw through their lies in less than 2 hours. My father got 8 years in federal prison. My Uncle Steve got 3 years for fraud. My Aunt Linda was ordered to pay restitution of $125,000. My cousin Mark's credit was destroyed, and he lost his house when he couldn't pay the judgment against him. But the real victory came 6 months later. I was at my grandmother's house, now legally mine, when I got a call from my mother. She was crying desperate. "Emma, please. Your father is in prison. Steve is bankrupt. Linda lost her house. We need help. We're family." I looked out the window at the garden my grandmother had loved, now blooming with the roses she'd planted decades ago. "You're right, Mom. We are family. And family doesn't steal from each other. Family doesn't threaten elderly relatives. Family doesn't abandon their children at boarding school because they're inconvenient." "That's not fair," she sobbed. "We made mistakes, but we're still your parents." "No," I said quietly. "Grandma Rose was my parent. She's the one who raised me, loved me, and protected me. You were just the people who happened to share my DNA. So you're going to let us lose everything?" I thought about that recording, about my father's cold voice threatening the woman who'd given him life. "You already lost everything, Mom. You lost it the moment you chose money over family. You lost it when you let Dad steal from his own mother. You lost it when you stood by and watched him threaten her." "We'll contest the will," she said, anger creeping into her voice. "We'll prove she was manipulated." "Go ahead," I replied. "I have 3 years of recorded conversations where she talks about how disappointed she was in all of you. I have bank records showing Dad's theft. I have witness statements from her neighbors who saw how you treated her. Take me to court, Mom. See how that works out for you." She hung up on me. That was 2 years ago. My father is still in prison. My mother moved to a small apartment across town and works as a retail clerk. My Uncle Steve drives for a delivery company. My Aunt Linda cleans houses for a living. And me? I used part of my inheritance to start a foundation that helps elderly people protect themselves from financial abuse by family members. It's called the Rose Wellington Foundation, named after my grandmother. We've helped over 200 families in the past year. I still live in Grandma's house. I tend her rose garden. I sleep in the room where she used to tell me bedtime stories when I was small. And sometimes when I'm sitting on the front porch in the evening, I swear I can hear her voice on the wind, telling me how proud she is. My family thought they could steal from an old woman and get away with it. They thought I was too young, too naive, too grateful to fight back. They had no idea that the quiet granddaughter they dismissed had learned everything she knew about strength and determination from the woman they'd underestimated. They wanted her money. Instead, they got justice. And I got something much more valuable than an inheritance. I got the truth, and the power to make sure no other family gets away with what mine tried to do. The best part? Last month, I got a letter from my father in prison. He's up for parole in 2 years, and he wanted to make amends with his daughter. He wrote about how sorry he was, how he'd learned from his mistakes, how he hoped we could be a family again. I wrote back. Just one line: a real father never would have threatened his mother. A real father never would have stolen from the woman who raised his daughter. You're not my family. You're just a cautionary tale. I never heard from him again. But sometimes, late at night, I think about that moment when I first heard that recording, when I realized that the people I'd spent my whole life trying to please were capable of threatening the one person who'd ever truly loved me. And I smile, because they thought that was the end of my story, the naive young woman who'd inherited money she didn't deserve. They had no idea it was just the beginning. Please subscribe to our channel and tell us in the comments where you're watching this video from.